Alright guys, so the US is on the brink of the unthinkable. It's really sad, it's worrying and outrageous that we have come to this point. Now it seems that the neocons in Washington have won and we are one step away from full escalation in the Middle East. Iran and Israel fighting it out is one thing, but once the Americans get involved, it's going to change everything. Now as observers and investors, it's really key that we understand the lay of the land and why this war could push the US economy closer towards bankruptcy. Now, the US might win or come out ahead, but the economy will be a smoldering ruin, and not to mention the physical devastation across the Middle East. And by now, we have seen the tweets from the White House. Trump is demanding unconditional surrender from Iran, and he knows where the supreme leader is hiding, apparently. Now, one can imagine the intel Trump is being fed from the US Security Council. And what's truly disturbing is Trump ignoring his own intelligence chief. I think we all know this by now. Tulsi Gabbard, who's probably going to have to resign now. She told him Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons yet, but Trump believes otherwise.
How close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
So we are moving closer and closer towards a confrontation. Now the manner of how the war will be fought won't really be like Russia and Ukraine. You can't land troops there without mass casualties, so we can expect missiles to rain down and flatten Iran. Now I'm not a technical person and definitely not a warfare expert, but you don't need to be Einstein to realize this conflict will damage the US economy. Now we have neocon voices growing louder. People like Lindsey Graham, who are interventionist hawks, are outright supporting direct involvement. If it takes bombs, bunker buster bombs, so be it. The window for diplomacy has passed. We are in the land of force. Now I don't see how Trump can extricate himself out of this one without looking weak. And he's all about showing the world how strong he is. And we have to talk about the economic impacts here, not just how much the war will cost, but what comes after that. And obviously, a big risk will be Iran's oil infrastructure blowing up from US or attacks from Israel. And if we enter an all-out confrontation, we can expect Iran and their allies to start shutting down vital shipping lanes. As such, the risk of higher inflation is definitely on the cards. Now, according to RBC Capital, US stocks could collapse by 20% in this high inflation scenario. It's pretty simple to understand why this is the case. If oil spikes to triple digits, consumer confidence and spending will collapse. This will hit US companies like a bag of bricks. Then earnings will drop and we could see a big repricing happen. Now the S&P could fall way below 5,000 points if Trump decides to pull the trigger. So everyone, especially those with a 401k in stocks, will feel poorer. So there is a material impact even if you are thousands of miles away. There's also a direct cost to waging this war. Now, when the Russia-Ukraine war started, one of the first few things I did was to buy up assets, right? This included gold, stocks, because eventually the value of currency will get debased. Now, back in 2013, during the Obama era, the US was contemplating entering Iran, and American scientists did their own calculations of how much the devastation will cost. And if we just consider a comprehensive bombing campaign without sending in US troops, the price tag would still be unthinkable. The global economy would get hit with a $1.7 trillion bill. And the scenario goes through bombing Iran's military bases, the Navy, Army, Air Force, amongst others. And the amount includes the impacts from inflation, a financial market collapse, and military expenditures. But if we want to be realistic, it's a conservative estimate. That $1.7 trillion bill in today's dollars would probably be 3 or 4 trillion. How much do you think a conflict with Iran will cost the US today? Now, I wager much more. Where do you think the money is going to come from, guys? It's going to come from debt and deficits. And once you understand this, you realize that the dollar is headed down the tubes. It's as if we haven't learned from all the wars in the past. The economic costs are horrendous and everyone will be paying for it through monetary debasement. And let's really break it down because this frustrates me to the core. When the US government decides to wage a war, any war, it's done by borrowing a ton of money. and this is used to drive deficit spending higher. Now, funding Ukraine was a big reason why Biden drove the deficit to 6.4% of GDP, and that was a proxy war without direct involvement. As a result, the Federal Reserve will get cornered. Powell or whoever's in charge will have to make two choices or watch the bond market implode. He will have to slash interest rates on the short end to allow Bessent to borrow cheap money, or the Fed will have to do QE and buy the bonds to fund Trump's war directly. Meanwhile, the world will be horrified. Foreigners see this and they will realize, hey, the dollar is now a sinking ship with even more holes. They will start dumping American assets, especially treasury bonds, and that drives yields up and forces the Fed to buy even more bonds to prevent an implosion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is monetary debasement from war. And it's not like the US economy is robust with low debt levels. They simply can't afford to fight two physical wars, a tariff war, and pass a ridiculous spending bill that drives up the national debt. Now, eventually, one of these will break the entire system. Then, debasement of the currency will happen in real time. Global investors are already repudiating Trump's spendthrift agenda. They want out, especially when the dollar has lost more than 10% of its value against global currencies. Now, there's a reason why gold is above $3,000 and why Wall Street is saying the dollar could collapse by another 10%. It's because Trump's policies are seriously anti-dollar. Now, consciously or not, everything he does is driving the US dollar down to the ground. And let me remind everyone of the obvious and why people like Tudor Jones and Jeff Gundlach, they are not delusional. When Trump took office, the dollar was at a high. It actually rose because investors believed Trump would bring about transformational change, change for the good. But over time, after his countless tariff threats, plus Liberation Day, let's not forget about that, everything changed. People realized he wasn't joking and he's moving to isolate the US economy and break global trade. Even after the US China reprieve, the pause, the dollar kept falling lower and lower. So just imagine what a direct war with Iran would mean: bigger deficits and a national debt mountain that will fly to the moon. It's really crazy if we think about US foreign policy and trade policy. All of it is conspiring to send the dollar down in a hurry. And on July the 8th, we could be back to the Liberation Day tariff levels. The 10% pause might get reversed while the US could be at war with Iran. It's a double whammy of the highest order. Now, this is frustrating because none of us can do anything that matters. We are all spectators in this grand game of chess. But we best learn to protect ourselves from this mess. Now, just in trade policy alone, the US is breaking apart the virtuous dollar cycle, and this has been a mechanism that kept the dollar strong for many years. Foreigners would recycle their earnings back to US markets, both the stock market and US bonds. Investors see their prices rise, so they pile even more money into the system. And this gives the US easy access to capital and drives down the cost of borrowing. As a result, Americans can afford more goods. They can afford the good life, while the world is denied capital, so consumption for them drops. But now this virtuous cycle is broken. Thanks to the tariffs, imports to the US will drop and prices go higher. US economic growth stops outperforming the world as a consequence. Now countries stop recycling their dollars into US markets and have even more capital for themselves. And what do they do with this money? Now some of it will go into assets like foreign stocks, gold, and their own local bonds. But their local consumption will also increase, allowing their economies to grow faster. Now imagine adding monetary debasement to the mix. If yields fly up and the dollar goes down, foreign holders of dollar assets will feel screwed. Now even less money flows into American markets, and I call this the flywheel of stupid economic decisions. And yes, US asset prices might rise thanks to a devalued currency, but they could still underperform the world in real terms after you account for inflation. The results might not be as rosy as Trump thinks. Now, during Bessent's Congress hearing, he once again confirmed the US has to keep borrowing money to keep the entire system afloat.
So, as you said, 3% growth will change the trajectory. What I have also said is we did not get here overnight. I have gained about 10 pounds since inauguration. I'm not going to cut off my arm to get back to my January 20th weight.
However, to accomplish that, he will need to find buyers for bonds, doesn't he? Now, as we established earlier, demand for US treasuries just isn't there. Domestic and foreign buyers are very hesitant to pile more money into US debt, especially for the long term. If we do enter into a war, this could last for years or even decades, maybe even another Afghanistan. Demand for US bonds is still very tepid. The 20-year auction result yielded a C plus grade because yields hit nearly 5%. International demand came in lighter than expected, and the big fear is dollar devaluation getting worse. After 20 years, they might lose out to real inflation, especially after you convert the currency. And that's why Bessent is in desperation mode. He needs new buyers and he's willing to throw down a really, really risky card to make it happen. Now, this might just be building the genesis of a new banking crisis, especially if greed sets in. And guys, this is Wall Street, right? Gordon Gekko will be back. US regulators are now planning to ease capital buffers for banks. They might cut the leverage ratio up to 150 basis points for the biggest lenders on Wall Street. So imagine JP Morgan and the Bank of America flush with cash, buying even more treasuries. Bessent wants to encourage them to buy US debt to raise money and prevent yields from exploding. And let's call this for what it is. The Trump administration wants a bailout from Wall Street. It's the opposite of what normally happens. The US government is broke and the plan is to use the balance sheets of big commercial banks. And once again, there's technically nothing wrong with it. But he's making a very big gamble. He is betting that yields won't go any higher. And this just makes the entire financial system more fragile, doesn't it? It makes the US economy more susceptible to treasury dumps around the world. Now, one can imagine China doing a sell off to add more pressure, introducing enormous stress to the US banking system. Might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. US banks might not care about the dollar strength, but they do care about interest rates. It doesn't mean they won't suffer losses. They're already sitting on nearly $500 billion worth of unrealized losses. It could get worse if yields rise, which they could. If trust in the dollar collapses, we could enter a deadly scenario. One where recession happens but bond yields actually rise, just like an emerging market. And that's why entering a war with Iran now is financially risky to an incredible degree. So I truly hope things mellow down and the unthinkable doesn't happen. But we have Iran vowing not to surrender and Trump telling us to play a guessing game.
Closer to striking Iranian nuclear facilities. Where's your mindset on that?
I can't say that, right? You don't seriously think I'm going to answer that question? Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate.
Well, I don't know about you, but that sounds very terrifying to me. I guess he might do it or he might not do it. But let me know what you think. Will the US enter the conflict? And can America afford yet another fight on yet another front? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.